My name's Guy Dauncey. I'm over on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. And I devote all of my living work, and have done for 50 years, to dreaming of a better future. I call myself a practical utopian, because what we need is utopian, but it has to be practical. And every single thing good we've achieved in the past has come about as a result of utopian thinking. So today I'm presenting a new ecological civilization, and this is a big one, because we really have come to the closing years of the industrial civilization that dominates everything. So we're talking about a new ecological civilization based on the economics of kindness, not on the economics of self-interest and greed. And we're doing so in the midst of the COVID crisis, which is showing no signs of dying down at all. In fact, it's expanding globally. We're going to cover these 5 things, these 5 topics, and I'll go through them all in the next half hour or so. And in the context of COVID, we need to move from COVID-19 to Courage 20, which stands for caring, open-hearted, united and resilient, all together on our one green earth. So we're talking about building a new ecological civilization. What might it look like? I can't show you the economics of it and the details at the moment, but I can show you the external sense of it, because it already exists around the world, whether it's in the way we design our towns and communities, the way we travel around, the way we have our housing settlements, that's co-housing project, the way we build community, grow food, cluster homes together to save farmland and green space. That's the Fintorn eco-village up in Scotland. More food growing. This is the planned Regenesis communities in Holland, where they're self-sufficient completely in food and water and energy. It's more of the same. Growing more food intensively, bio-intensively, organically, regeneratively. Restoring nature, taking the barren lands that have been stripped of goodness and letting nature return their wealth. Bringing nature back into the heart of our cities, as they've done here in the city of Seoul in South Korea. And being creative in our designs, and being even more creative and yet more creative. The imagination can take flight in all this stuff. And in the heart of this, knowing that nature itself, without human intervention, needs to be there for us to nourish the soul, keep us breathing, keep us sane, keep us whole. Our children need nature. They need a hope for a future. They need a new ecological civilization. But first, alas, realistically, we have to understand our ocean of trouble. Because without understanding how do we get where we need to go, we're facing a climate emergency, a biodiversity emergency, the role of selfish profit-maximizing finance, plutocratic tax havens, slowing economic growth in the developed world, dramatic inequality, ecological overshoot, a huge debt overload, private and corporate and government, the plutocratic corruption of democracy. We're facing crude nationalism and racism. We're facing affordable housing crisis. We have a crisis of work. We have collapsing communities, a loss of trust, increasing loneliness, crisis of opioids and mental illness, and continuing racial oppression. This adds up overall to a sense of a loss of civilizational purpose and direction. And on top of that, we now have a COVID pandemic. So it's a pretty daunting list of things to consider. And it bewilders some of our younger people when they look at what we're doing. They see that our house is on fire and we're just not acting. So when this is all over, what should change? When we recover from COVID, when we come back, do we come back to normal or to something else? We need to change everything. The fundamental thing here is that humans are motivated by dreams of life and wholeness, not by nightmares of death and collapse. So what's our vision? It's a new ecological civilization that can address all of these troubles. I didn't invent the term. There are many other, well-known thinkers around the world who've been developing this theme over the last 5 to 10 years. They've been writing about it, holding, conferences about it. So, but first we need to say, what are the causes of our ocean of trouble? So a correct diagnosis can lead to a correct set of policies and changes to allow the change to happen. For the last 4 years, I've been deeply into economics. That's my bookshelf behind me. I've read, 300 books on economics and economic history and anthropology to understand the economic origins of our troubles and to enable me to build my understanding of the economics of kindness. There are 4 fundamental causes for our troubles. The first is faulty economic ideas. They go back to the sort of the 1800s, and the origins of left-right thinking starts with the French National Assembly, the French Revolution. Left has been seen to stand for socialism based on Marx's dialectical materialism, class struggle, and faith in a workers' revolution. And right has been seen as capitalist based on the primacy of rational self-interest following the so-called laws of neoclassical economics. They're both wrong. They both deny us free human agency. We're not subject to any supposed laws of Marxist dialectical materialism or of modern neoclassical economics. We have consciousness, which gives us agency. When we couple our agency with intelligence, creativity, hard work, imagination, research, teamwork, cooperation, and love, it enables us to do amazing things. What's wrong with capitalism? It enshrines selfishness as an economic law. It dismisses kindness and cooperation. The free market with free trade is supposedly bringing all the progress we want. The role of governments is minimized. Nature is ignored. Climate emergency is ignored. Realities of power and ownership are ignored. The instinct of workers to cooperate is suppressed. Realities of money, banking, and debt are ignored. All other realities of human existence are ignored. Free trade rules, the need for resilience is ignored. And neoclassical economics blesses all this with quasi-religious mathematical zeal. Neoclassical economics is the underpinning of capitalism and neoliberalism, which is the modern hyper version of capitalism. And it's all based on phony, false economic understandings from the 19th century. But the struggle, this division between right and left has brought is just appalling. This division between right and left and the fear of communism, the cruelties of outright capitalism, all of these atrocities, the hundreds of millions of deaths, are based on faulty economic ideas. Here's one key understanding I've come to, that capitalism is not an economic system. It is a cultural system of selfish values that are expressed in the economy through the use of capital. They become locked into systems of property ownership and law, but fundamentally it's not the system that's the problem, it's the values. The values of make as much money as you can, cut up the earth, harvest it, do what you want with it. Yes, Sammy, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, our fathers' corporations created a lot of value for their shareholders. So the younger generation is saying, do something, you maniacs. And the older generation saying, oh, it's easy to criticize young lady. Suppose you got an alternative worked out, hysterical, get yourself. Well, I do have an alternative worked out. We do have an alternative worked out. And it's getting clearer and clearer every day. Capitalism is a cultural system of selfish values expressed in the economy through the use of capital. The economics of kindness, which is the alternative, is a cultural system of compassionate values expressed in the economy through the use of democracy. Second fundamental cause of our ocean of trouble is the ancient impulse to dominate. To understand how this came about, we need to go back, way back, to our shared ancestors with chimpanzees. We share 98% of our DNA. We share the same maternal impulse, the same playful impulse, the same caring impulse, the same aggressive impulse to dominate, the same hierarchical impulses showing fear, submission, and friendliness, the same cooperative and altruistic impulses, caring for non-kin with no personal genetic advantage. There's a group selection advantage, which is biologically effective, evolutionary theory. David Sloan Wilson's a biologist, anthropologist, who says selfishness beats altruism within a group, but altruistic groups beat selfish groups. Everything else is commentary. And we evolved in groups, not as individuals. We share the same murderous impulse. Non-alpha male chimps will resent domination and will sometimes even kill their leader. When our ancestors invented bows and arrows and spears, Working together as a team became all important, and the alpha males suddenly lost their physical advantage. All across the world, hunter-gatherers became egalitarian and cooperative. They go out of their way to suppress upstarts and self-importance, and they lived by this code for 300,000 years. All of our cultural codes of morals and ethics evolved during our hunter-gatherer years. To dominate or cooperate, that's the question, not whether you're right-wing or left-wing. We obviously need businesses, we obviously need government. It's an artificial division to say right-wing or left-wing. The critical thing is whether we are going to dominate or cooperate. That is the question. Our primate ancestors lived for 6 million years in hierarchical dominating cultures with tough alpha males, and they still do today because they haven't evolved beyond that. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors had 300,000 years of egalitarian cooperative cultures in which they went out of their way to suppress self-importance and domination, using joking, teasing, social distancing, exile, and if need be, assassination. With the coming of agriculture and food surpluses, however, these egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies gave way to what anthropologists call achievement societies. Over time, however, successful achievers obtained inheritances for their children, enabling the return of domination. That brought war, conquest, slavery, colonies, empire, and yet more. Centuries of it, millennia of it. All of our written history has been shaped by this understanding of our past, not by the 300,000 years of our hunter-gatherer past, who are derided as primitives, barbarians, savages. When it comes to our economies, for as long as 5,000 years, almost all societies that were not hunter-gatherer or achievement societies have developed their economies within the cultural landscape of domination. We think this is normal. Domination by the wealthy and powerful, bringing private property, private land ownership, private banks, private debts, debt slavery. On the same level, you can have domination by a communist state with state-owned and controlled property, land, business, banks, and debts, bringing starvation, cruelty, and hunger. Now, the market itself is highly cooperative. People really get along with each other and they trade. You have to be cooperative to run a market. The market system and market economics is inherently a cooperative activity. The Silk Road, highly cooperative. Imagine you're trading from Istanbul or Venice all the way to China. Think of the chains of cooperation needed. If you start cheating or dominating, you're becoming a jerk. You're going to be cut out of those trading links of trust. Dominating cultures bring conquest, ownership, colonialism, slavery and empire, capitalism and neoliberalism. Cooperative cultures bring mutual aid societies, the commons, the market, trade itself, social finance, insurance, cooperatives, community banks, community economics, well-being economics, and donut economics, which I'll come to. So when we compare a dominating business and a cooperative business, the one is guided by self-interest, the other by social purpose. The one is controlled by investors and CEOs, the other's by workers. The one maximizes shareholder returns, the other one wants to maximize overall success, and so on and so on and so on. The one has up to 900 to 1 wage ratio. Cooperatives have an 8 to 1 wage ratio. So there's a lot of difference here, and most local businesses in a community are operating cooperatively. They may not be cooperatives, but their values are cooperative. They know they have to be fair and decent to their customers and their suppliers, or they won't be able to stay in business. It's primarily the big mega corporations that maximize greed and selfishness. The one operates on principles of capitalism. The other one is actually already operating on the principles of a new ecological civilization, with the exception of ecological understanding. Which brings me to the third fundamental cause of our ocean of troubles, which is ecological ignorance and abuse. Even cooperatives can behave with ecological ignorance if they just haven't done their homework and understood what it's all about. We are destroying nature. We're destroying biodiversity. We're tearing it apart, cutting it down, harvesting it, and turning it into everything we like to consume. GDP really stands for gross depletion of the planet. That's the true measure of that phrase. Yay, rainforest destruction increases GDP. But, oops, for economists, the loss of the rainforest, just an unfortunate externality, doesn't show up on the books, no need to worry. The climate crisis, just another externality, don't you both bothering yourself, not part of the economic thinking. So carbon cycle, why do I need to know what that is? My gut microbiome, why do I need to know what that is? Where our waste goes, huh? Role of keystone species, the ecological origin of pandemics, why do I need to know about that? Well, yeah, maybe I do need to understand these things. If that's where pandemics are coming from, which is our bad relationship with nature, our destructive, exploitative relationship. So what are we proposing? Just two very simple big things. Number one, every school leaver must have studied Ecology 101 and Climate 101 and Nature 101 from K to 12, all the way through. Not allowed entrance to university unless you've passed. That starts eliminating cabinet ministers who don't understand the carbon cycle and things like that. Number two, a lot more complex, that every business must operate within nature's resilience boundaries. And I'll come to what they are. A lot of regulatory change to achieve that. We've got to flatten this curve as well and get back to within Earth's operating capacity, where everything we do is sustainable and not exploitative. So we can come to an economy that's in harmony with nature. This is within view. The people are working on it all over the world. Then we come to the fourth fundamental cause, which is basically our loss of civilizational story. We're drifting. There's no sense of purpose and direction anymore unless you're part of this new movement for a new ecological civilization. This question is very old, with perennial need for a story to tell us what's really happening. We look at the stars and we puzzle, we ask, what are we doing? What are we for? Seriously, we need to know. Our early story was animism, the fact that there were spirits in all of nature. And we developed polytheism, moved to monotheism, one true God. And my true God is always better than your true God. Then we come to rationalism and humanism, starting with the Enlightenment in the 1700s. That brings us socialism and national socialism, democratic socialism, materialism, narcissism, neoclassical economism, and grief and despairism. We have to rethink everything. Throughout existence, having a positive intention of a future outcome has been a precondition for success. If we don't have it, we drift. And those who have got a sense of what they want, go for it. We need to build a new ecological civilization. That's the new vision. And as we build a green cooperative economy, we are also building the economic foundations of a new ecological civilization. They go hand in hand together. This is the standard model of the economy. It's just a limited little box. And it's completely disregarding nature, communities, workers, and everything else. Kate Raworth's a colleague in Britain who's written the book on donut economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. She says that today's economy is divisive and degenerative by default. Tomorrow's economy must be distributive and regenerative by design. We need to move from ego dominating our world to the harmony of eco, not dominating the world. Go back to a harmony with nature. These are the resilience boundaries that form the outer side of her donut. We cannot afford to breach these boundaries because without them, civilization can't survive. Climate change, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone, the phosphorus cycle, and things that are upside down, biodiversity loss, aerosol loading, all these are harmful to the entire planet. So there we have the 9 resilience boundaries around the outside of Kate Raworth's donut, and in the middle, the social foundation for a healthy life, access to clean water, food, health, education, work, peace, social justice, housing. In between is the safe and a just space for humanity, where we build a regenerative, distributive economy. In Holland, the city of Amsterdam has chosen Kate's framework to restart their economy after COVID-19, to reshape their whole city economy on the framework of the donut economy. So it's important to understand we do not inhabit one economy, as the economists think. We actually inhabit 4 intertwined economies, starting with nature's economy, foundation of everything there is. Then we have the social economy, which is our human relationships without money, our caring, our neighborhoods, our friends, our family, everything we do without cash payments. the market economy, when we do bring cash payments into all that stuff, the public economy, when we bring in the role of government. Those are the four fundamental economies. However, there's a fifth economy that I call the war economy, which is trying to attack and savage all of these four economies. There's a struggle that goes on between those who want to live by kindness and cooperation and those who want to live for status and power, who want to dominate. That struggle is 6 million years old. It will still exist in 6 million years' time. The only way to overcome it is to defeat it, to suppress that impulse to domination. So when we look at building an economics of kindness, in each of these realms in the green box, we're looking to apply that way of thinking and the principles of the economics of kindness to each of these realms and to transform them. So for instance, if we take businesses and corporations, one of the many ideas here is legislation that would apply to every business above a certain size, that over a set period of time, such as a 10-year transition or by 2030, every business must adopt a social business charter, embracing 10 big commitments. So basically, a social business charter is what has already been embraced by benefit corporations around the world, who are sort of committing themselves to an equality of stakeholder interests between their workers, their communities, the environment, and their bottom line. So first commitment to state its larger purpose, including a legally recognized commitment to consider the interests of all stakeholders and to pursue social and ecological purpose in addition to financial purpose. Secondly, to report annually on progress using integrated reporting to track natural capital, social and human capital, as well as financial capital. Thirdly, to meet standards of social and environmental performance that increase each year as we make the transition to a new ecological civilization. I'm actually recommending that investments are red listed, amber listed, and green listed. And red listed investments, you're not allowed to actually invest in them at all, such as increased fossil fuel development. To pledge not to lobby for any toxic fossil fuel or tax avoiding industry. These are all aspects of domination. To engage in profit sharing, to offer an equity stake in ownership of the business to all employees who have worked with the business for more than 2 years, turning it into a more cooperative-minded enterprise. To strive to have at least 50% women and racial diversity on the board of directors. To encourage workplace democracy, allowing workers in larger companies to form a union and enabling them to elect 40% or 50% of the company directors. In the event of a sale, closure, or impending bankruptcy, as is the case with many businesses today, to grant first right of refusal to the workers or community organizations who may wish to buy the business. To pay taxes fairly and not engage in transfer pricing, offshore banking, tax havens, or any other tricks like that. And for larger corporations, maybe over $100 million annual turnover, to appoint a public board of trustees who will be accountable to the larger public good. As soon as a business signs the new social purpose charter, it would pay lower taxes and get priority treatment in bids on government contracts. After an agreed period of time, which I'm saying is 10 years, every business that has not signed would be denied a license to operate. We changed the DNA of capitalism to turn it into an economics of kindness and cooperation. Then we have financial institutions. I've just finished writing the chapter on this. It's the most complex area, but basically we need similar legislation applying to every financial institute above a certain size, that over a set period of time, it must become socially responsible in placing similar 10 big commitments. Once it signs, it would pay lower taxes and get priority treatment and bids on government contracts. After the agreed period, those that do not sign would lose their $100,000 customer deposit insurance, get no support from the central bank, and alternatively simply be denied a license to operate. Turning to farming, we need legislation that would apply to every farm above a certain size that over a set period of time, and I'm saying again, 10 years, every farm must become socially and environmentally responsible, embracing similar big commitments, including phasing out chemical pesticides and fertilizers, developing a wildlife regeneration plan, a soil regeneration plan, and securing non-hybrid open-pollinated seed supply. We need to grow much more local food. So I've gone into this in another presentation with sort of major sense of what regenerative farming is, which you can find on the internet under that title. So it's another 45-minute talk. There's a lot of detail, but I can't go into more of that now. Turning to energy, basically we need legislation to set a target for 100% renewable energy by 2040 for all purposes. and to embrace all the practical policies and programs in this publication I did called The Climate Emergency, a 26-week transition program, which I presented to MPs in Parliament back in February. A lot of detail, more than I can go into, but here's the core of it. That's the update of the document. It was fossil fuels that launched the industrial age and the modern world. It's fossil fuels that made advanced engineering, solar voltaics, and electric vehicles possible. Fossil fuels are not wrong. They're just part of a phase of development. More solar energy reaches Earth in an hour than we use in a year on the whole planet. And with every passing year, solar technology gets better and cheaper. We had 300,000 years with solar energy derived through firewood, through stored energy in photosynthesis. 300 years with it being stored as fossil fuels, and 2 billion years when we move to direct solar electricity into the far, far future. And every year, the efficiency of solar electricity is increasing and the price is falling. What's not to love? So basically, it's farewell and thank you, fossil fuels, with a deep appreciation for the sweat, labor, toil, distress, exploitation that's gone on in your name. And it's welcome to the solar age. The Stanford University Solutions Project has said that a transition to a world powered by 80% wind and water by 2030 is possible for 143 countries and for 100% by 2050, wind, water, and solar. Remember. Such a transition would reduce the entire global energy demand by 57% because of the inherent efficiencies of electric vehicles and heat pumps. It would reduce private energy costs from $17 to $6 trillion a year, 6 or 7 trillion, reduce the full social cost, which private costs and healthcare costs and climate costs, by 91%, and create 28 million more long-term full-time jobs that will be lost in the transition while using a tiny fraction of land. And if we also move to cycling and transit, then the global energy demand falls more than 57%. It falls, by 60, 70%. So how do we finance this transition? This is the most technical slide in my presentation here, but basically, these are coming from my big paper on, the 26-week program, climate action bonds, issued by the government, bought by the Bank of Canada using green quantitative easing. 5% green bonds, guaranteed by the Bank of Canada as buyer of last resort. Interest-free loans issued by public banks, guaranteed by the Bank of Canada. Pay-as-you-save utility loans, property assessed clean energy loans, and then eliminating the fossil fuel subsidies. This needs no increase in taxation, no increase in government debt, carbon tax rising to $280 a ton by 2030, being 100% revenue neutral, returned to families as a check in the mail every January. Moving on, what about work and income? How do we transform this realm? The big decision is whether we go for universal basic income or universal basic services. The basic income is a lot more expensive and only put money in your pocket but leaves nothing else changed. University basic services changes a lot more, as I'll come to. Right? We're talking about the development of workers' cooperatives, employee share owning programs, giving trade union proper rights, flex security, as in Denmark, where the employers can fire workers more easily, but workers have guaranteed, good unemployment pay and support in finding new work. And then workers' representation on the board. So there are workers on the board of companies in Denmark that practice flex security. Workers' cooperatives, we need study circles to learn about them, incubators to develop them, financial investment and support to help make them happen. We need fair taxation, a wealth tax on billionaires, inheritance taxes, to end the use of all tax havens, social wealth funds, so we all gradually accumulate share ownership in the big corporations, and ecological restoration taxes. Ecological restoration is a big part of all this. So we need a nationwide shift to organic regenerative farming out the pesticides and fertilizers that are doing so much harm to nature. We need local ecological restoration maps and plans for how each area can be restored over the next few years. We need, young people being paid to help environmental organizations to do this, because right now they're facing huge crisis of unemployment because of COVID. I'm proposing for Canada a nature restoration call, jobs for 50,000 young people a year. They're learning about nature, they're doing the work that's needed and getting jobs at the same time. We need a similar transition in forestry. nationwide system to ecosystem-based forestry, phasing out clear cutting, phasing out of timber for pulp and paper, substituting alternative and recycled fibers. The paper I use it myself is made from sugar fibers, waste from sugar plants, and the permanent protection of all remaining ancient forests. Then we come to the community, where the whole idea of universal basic services comes in. We need to contrast the increase in personal wealth with the increase in community wealth. So if you imagine community wealth, you're living on a fixed income in a community with very few resources, no affordable housing, no decent places to grow food, expensive transit, no parks, no decent libraries, nothing to help you. That's grim. If you take the same person on a low income, you have affordable housing, great public transit, affordable childcare, safe bike lanes, urban food possibilities, great schools, work sharing, a sharing economy, lots of green space, solar energy, great urban spaces, community currencies, basic income, free college education, social purpose businesses, banks and cooperatives, social enterprises and non-profits. That gives you a cooperative local economy, and it's a lot cheaper to live in it because of that money you saved on affordable housing, affordable childcare, public transport, cycling, and all other stuff. So you can transform the same, misery can become happiness on the same low income. Changing the income is another story with another part of changes that I've already referred to. So basically, we're building the new ecological civilization on the ground in the communities where we live. To trigger all this, we need a program of CPR, of cooperative public renewal, with government support for non-profits to do the training, organizing, collaborating to build the community agency needed to start community banks, social enterprises, community currencies, affordable housing cooperatives, and that stuff. It's not easy. It takes a lot of learning, a lot of thinking, a lot of collaboration. With the right support at the high government level, could finance people to do that work and give us the foundation of sort of community muscle of skills to do this. Then we can sort of pull off the celebration in our neighborhoods that bring us community wealth. We can be whatever we have the courage to see. If we can imagine this thing and visualize it clearly and understand the policies clearly, we can engage in making it happen. Then we come to global trade, and I'm beginning to wrap up here. This is a huge factor that impacts all of us right across the world. Christian Felber is my champion for this. He's an Austrian economist who's written this book called Trading for Good, How Global Trade Can Be Made to Serve People and Not Money. And he's basically, right now we have free trade zones, where the big corporations want reduced trade tariffs, open competition, the race to the regulatory bottom, and trade tribunals that protect capital and not nature, countries, or workers. What Christian is proposing is ethical trade zones, with trade tariffs based on compliance with human rights, labor rights, and climate protection. So if you're trading with a country, they don't have those things, you impose a tariff. If they got all those things, no tariff. This gives you a race to the regulatory top, and trade tribunals to protect nature, countries, and workers, as well as capital. So, and also we need to sort of really tackle the whole conflict and the expenses of conflict and war, and spending money on what's needed, not on wasting it. Look at these numbers. In 2015, violence and war drained $13.6 trillion from the economy. That's $150 a month for everyone on the planet. 45% on direct military expenditure, 26% internal security. We spent 100 times more on waging war, than on waging peace. So the resources are there if we just get our heads together and stop this stupidity. And there's been a call during COVID-19, it seems to have disappeared off the radar, for a global ceasefire so we can focus on the fight of our lives. But now that COVID's coming back stronger than ever, that refocusing may yet happen. So where COVID-19 meets the emerging new ecological civilization is where the rethinking that's happening. A lot of us are part of these Zoom calls when we are literally every day crafting different components of the future. We're pushing for, building back better, for a just recovery, for a change in the way we do things. And it's totally critical. This particular time, we've got these 10 years. This year, 2020, is the time for all the planning and organizing. It's got to be ready to roll out next year. We need a green and a just COVID recovery plan, a new Green Deal, corporate bailout clauses, and a debt jubilee to sort of handle the accumulating private and small business debts. If transition projects are not shovel ready, the recovery will revert to business as usual. So we've got to know what that money can be spent on. Here in BC, the government has set a deadline of July the 16th for ideas and inputs like, what do you think can change? So I've been part of a group called the Green Tech Education Council, sitting on their Green Economy Council, writing this portfolio of possibilities with 24 very specific, tangible proposals, which we've now presented to Cabinet and is being discussed at the Cabinet level in BC. But we're going to need people to get on board with this and get behind our proposals. I've already covered the big commitments. That's part of one of the ones in there is the business change. With things like companies which pay out dividends to shareholders and buy back their own shares, they should not be eligible for any aid programs. That's what Denmark's saying already. We're not going to bail you out. If you're registered in a tax haven and avoiding taxes, why should we give you any government money? First, make a commitment to repay all the money you've avoided, and then we'll discuss bailing you out or helping you. Academics, likewise, are saying we cannot afford to bail out the oil and gas industries and keep them going because they are the very things that are causing the climate crisis. So I put these thoughts together in a paper which you'll find on my website called When Climate Met COVID, integrating the two issues here. And basically, I'm finishing here. This is my book, Journey to the Future. It's a novel set in the future in the year 2032 that has a practical vision under one person visits Vancouver for 4 days in the year 2032. And Patrick gets to fall in love with that future because he sees how it can all work together. I've put together a website with 500 images of what a future can look like at Pinterest. And it's amazing. You want to fall in love with this yourself, right? So when this is all over, what should change? And the answer is everything. Continuing compassion for the most vulnerable, stronger public health care, much greater local resilience, more locally grown food, progress for kindness and well-being, not just more money, ecological restoration, strong, caring neighborhoods, affordable housing for all, a permanent end to homelessness, community wealth, the economics of kindness, 100% renewable energy, ethical trade, an end to war, and one world working together. We build ourselves a new ecological civilization. Thank you, and thank you to all the workers who are helping to keep us safe and calm and kind.
Wow, thank you, Guy.
You dream it, we need to plan it, we need to do it, hold it in our hearts, know that it's possible. That's my website, and yes, I'm done.
Oh, bravo. Always, it's always amazing to hear you speak. And we're very blessed to have several of your videos on creativelyunited.org. We have time for questions. Would anyone like to just unmute themselves and start asking some questions?
Hey, Guy.
Hey, good to see you.
See you. I saw this presentation before. I love it. I had to come back for more.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, really? I've been sharing it with everybody. It's fabulous. Fabulous work, Guy. Like you've got so much depth there, and everything you say is backed up by all your research.
Well, Rita, sometimes people tell me, oh, you're just preaching to the choir. But have you ever listened to a choir that wasn't well trained? Exactly. You don't want to go there. All our choirs need to be trained. And frankly, you can't understand the economics and finance of this stuff in your sleep. Someone's got to do the homework. These are specialist things we've got to think about and learn about, but there are people all around the world doing this homework. Yeah. All that I think I'm really doing is pulling it together and giving this new framework of the economics of kindness.
Right. And it's stuff we've heard before, but you bring it together so well and you update your information all the time and make it really relevant. So yeah, it's perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Well, I want to inspire us all to action so we all jump in and become part of it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Hi, this is Warren, and I'm also in the midst of reading Donut Economics, and I'm not an economist. I'm a retired old physician, but it's clear enough, and it's absolutely it's compelling her way out of all this, which is sort of fun. And I'm interested to know you reference her. And the other one is I think it's Charles Eisenstein. It's called Sacred Economics, which is I'm sure you've read that, and it's similar to these issues, but more it's not quite as precise as the way you're presenting it.
Yeah, it's actually, it's worse than that, Warren. Kate's book is one of the best and Charles is one of the worst.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't know economics at all.
Yes, it's a little
I
hooey.
just don't recommend it. It's gooey and vague and just doesn't get to grips with anything at all.
Yeah, but yeah.
Sorry,
Kate,
Charles.
No, that's great, but Kate is wonderful.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Well, while we're all jumping in there, I'll give Guy Dauncey. I've got my pom-poms, Guy, every time you present, just on Rita and others, and I can't stop jumping around. I'm sorry I was late to this party, very late, just coming in, but you still got me generated and excited. I was a sloth getting to the computer, and now I just can't wait to run a marathon.
So Ted, let's just have a little discussion on this. You worked in government for quite a few years, right?
And I try and apologize profusely.
No need. So when, and I worked outside government. I've been with nonprofits all my life, sort of always looking in and trying to push my way in. When you are working in a government committee or with a deputy minister or an ADM or an MLA, what is the framework they look at when they see this kind of thing coming at them? What happens that causes it to get lost?
Layers of hierarchy, for one thing. It depends on where it's received to start with, right? Is it received in the premier or the prime minister's office, etc., or is it received in a lower level staff group or department, like Climate Action Secretariat would like to receive a lot of the climate action oriented commentary like that you've articulated and others, and it gets ruminated on and then gets sent up the ladder, and there's numbers of layers inside the department, let alone layers above it before it gets to the minister's office. And then there's a plethora of agenda items to deal with, not making any defense to the likes of, say, the Minister of Environment, but he's got almost best of all on the phone here. It's got a wide portfolio of things to do. But nonetheless, climate change is certainly at the top of it. So, at the end of the day, it sometimes simply comes down to politics. And as a comment that I've made one or two times now, and I'll make it maybe a third time, being removed from government, and had a recent discussion with another colleague on it, is you can be an advocate or you can be a professional. And some of us try and be both inside a large bureaucracy. But there's a undeniable propensity for professionals in an organization, notwithstanding the mandate that they may have or be in charge of. So there's lots of staff that float between, say, Ministry of Environment or departments within Ministry of Environment over to Ministry of Municipal Affairs, over to Ministry of Transportation, what have you, and they basically have a professional lens on things, not necessarily being an advocate of it.
So is it for the professionals within the civil service, is it reasonable to assume that they bring with them a preset of ideas that they have in their own brains and may not know anything about the field they're suddenly thrown into?
Maybe I'll use, and maybe I shouldn't, maybe I'll use the climate action colleagues of the past as an example on that. Generally speaking, they're brought in without a lot of professional or educational enlightenment to the topic. There's not a lot of deep, there's not a lot of scientists, for example, and arguably nor should there be in the Climate Action Secretariat. And they call on other scientists, be it academic or elsewhere, on which they base some of their decision making.
Yeah. So what I've noticed in the climate field is the academics, on the whole, don't understand the solutions. They're not schooled in that stuff. They haven't worked in that stuff. It's the non-profits and the people in the private energy sector that actually in businesses that understand the solutions a lot better than the academics.
I think that's slowly changing, but I think you're bang on nonetheless. Absolutely, Guy. I mean, the self-professed scientists, they're not there to teach us and tell us what we do, what we need to and not need to do. They're there to tell us the state of the,
But I've twice now seen very leading climate scientists reach for nuclear power as a solution. And that what it tells me is that they haven't thought about anything else. So they just peel out of a box and throw it on the table without understanding the rights or wrongs of it, because they just haven't done that homework. And one of those is one of the best known US scientists, and the other is the best known British Columbia scientist. I shan't mention any names. So would you recommend then, in terms of getting traction, that you need a dual strategy, one that aims at the MLAs and the Premier's office through advocacy and nonprofits, and one that aims more technically at the ADMs and the staff, that has a more technical aspect to it and more in a more briefing notes?
Oh, probably a combination of the two in the ideal world, Guy. I think in part we're entering an era here where climate change, for a variety of different reasons, is coming to the fore, number one. Number two, we have this window of opportunity and enlightenment through COVID, be it appreciation because of zoonosis, background, causing the plight that we're in today, to just the window where we don't have a lot of cars. So hey, we can see New Delhi, we can see the Olympic Peninsula mountains. A more of appreciation for that. And related to that as well is something a lot of us have professed for years, as yourself, and that's talking about and articulating the co-benefits, the so many co-benefits from doing climate change. And we're starting to see that now, like green recovery, for example, green and just transition. Yeah. I've seen, of climate action plans at the municipal level, which I used to be most familiar with. It was primarily focused on climate action mitigation, and still by and large it is, but it's looking fundamentally, they're starting to institutionalize issues around equity, issues around food security, issues around embodied emissions.
The very word mitigation is a nerdy word. I mean, when did you have a cocktail party or a dinner and say, we need to mitigate this dinner? The word is solutions, which is more immediate.
Solutions. Absolutely right.
You're right.
And I understand. Sorry, I was just going to say, just so happens I was back and forthing with a colleague at the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, and they're apparently developing, I hope it's not a best kept secret, but they're in the process of developing a climate solutions toolkit. That's what I understand it's the term is. And
to me, the tragedy is that 20 years ago, I was proposing to the Royal BC Museum, they do a new exhibit on climate solutions.
Yeah, right. And you're right. And speaking of solutions, by the way, and thanks to some colleagues, not the latest and least of which is Frances. Frances, I had the pleasure of watching 2040 last night. Talk about solutions-oriented film, and of course, in part, I think it was one of your other earlier presentations, Frances, that talked about the update, the 2020 update now to the Project Drawdown, which of course is looking at the 100 top solutions to addressing climate change. So absolutely, and I think that should maybe become a key pivotal, positive, forward-looking word going forward.
Hi, I'm Debra from Seattle, and I'd like to suggest that there be a way for more of us who are in local climate organizations to have this material to disseminate through local talks and local whatever our activities are, so other people, so we can magnify spread the word. And and also, I mean, I know people in Seattle who are doing this with Drawdown and getting people to regularly come and hear about what that's all about. So I'd love to make sure that your vision for the future communities could be easily given by other people.
So Debra, the simple thing is send me an email. I can put you on my mailing list. My email is simply guydauncey@earthfuture.com. I'll put it in the chat box.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Guy. And we are a solutions hub, just so you know that, at creativelyunited.org. We are a free community solutions hub. And so thank you, Ted. I was thanking you, but I realized I was muted. I wanted to know, Guy, have you seen that film 2040 yet?
Not yet, no.
You'll love it. I just thought you're going to say, hey, that's the film they put to my books, because that's basically it. And I highly recommend it. Even if you have to buy it. It's worth watching. So inspiring. And Guy, was there any further comments you'd like to have?
Well, yeah, it's a comment on drawdown. The drawdown only focuses on, as it were, technological solutions. It does not include any policy solutions. So it doesn't actually enable you to go to government with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a weakness.
That's why we need this other action.
Yeah, so my book called The Climate Challenge, 101 Solutions, which was published 10 years ago, includes all the policy solutions. If you just Google my name on Amazon, you'll come to the book, The Climate Challenge. It's out of print now because I published it in 2009, and everyone lost interest in climate at that time.
And we've also got that on Creatively United with your video, Guy. Like we've got links there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.